So those Mach 5 and above vehicles, nothing that's on a commercial airplane, none of that will work in those types of hypersonic applications. And so we can make materials that truly there is no other way to make in a fiber format. And that's why we have a lot of involvement in the defense industry around making materials for, again, generally focused on hypersonic applications.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. Today I'm speaking with Shay Harrison, CEO of Freeform Fibers, the only company in the world commercializing laser-driven chemical vapor technology. That's a mouthful. Shay, thanks for chatting with me today.
I appreciate it, Dave. Thank you for having me on.
No, this is great, and this is pretty exciting, leading edge technology, and I look forward to, peeling this onion back a bit. So, you came more from the material sciences perspective before entrepreneurship. Can you tell a little bit about your background that kind of sets you up for this opportunity of leading Freeform Fibers?
Yeah, I definitely, that was not the career plan. When I went to school, I did not think I would end up in a CEO position. I did both my bachelor's and PhD in material science a long time ago. I'm old. And I went to work in industrial R&D. My career path went basically from large corporate to medium-sized, business to a national laboratory that was focused on actually nuclear naval subpower, and then landed in entrepreneurship, a small startup company. So I feel like I was kind of on this path of figuring out what was the right environment and business type that I wanted to be involved in. And I've been at Freeform for going on 12 years in June, and easily the longest career position I've had. I've done a lot in industrial R&D, but when I joined Freeform, I came in as the material scientist, and at a startup, you do a little bit of everything. And I was doing a lot of listening and learning from our former CEO, John Schneider, who had started a company and had a successful exit. And so basically I was absorbing and, picking up duties, and not expecting the conversation in his office about 5 years ago where he said, "Hey, I'm retiring. I think you should consider being the CEO," which I said, I laughed off and said, "Yeah, right." And, moved on to the next topic. And then when he came back to it, I thought, oh, he's being serious. So
that's great. Well, talk to us about Freeform Fibers. Like what is laser-driven chemical vapor technology?
So Freeform Fibers, so laser CVD, LCVD, laser CVD. The reason I got involved that's what I did my PhD on back in the 90s. So I knew one of the co-founders who was a professor at RPI, and he was very close with my advisor. So I knew him when I was a lowly grad student. And, I was stunned when that he and a couple of his students had, decided to commercialize the technology. Basically what it is, I refer to LCVD as a kind of a second cousin to the type of manufacturing processes that are used in silicon chip wafer manufacturing. They use a process called hot wall CVD. So basically, big chamber with your silicon substrates in there, put gases in there, heat that chamber up, right? And when I talk about a chamber, I'm talking about something that's, 20, 30 meters wide, right? And those gases react, and they break down, they react, and they form a desired material on the silicon chip. That's how you get all the little devices that are on the microchip that drives your phone, your laptop, your iWatch, right? What we do is something on a smaller scale. Instead of delivering that energy through basically heaters, right, to heat up a large space, we deliver the energy to break down the gas. We call them precursors. We deliver that energy through focused laser beams, and the laser beams are basically the diameter of a human hair. And because of that approach to delivering the energy, we're able to make fibers. And so the fibers are needed for what's coming in terms of technology. Actually, it's really here. It's in the process of transitioning, but basically replacing high temperature metal components in jet engines and nuclear power applications and defense related applications where the metal alloys can't handle the needed the application temperatures that where those environments need to go to. And so these things called ceramic matrix composites, or CMCs, lots of acronyms in our world, right? I can't get away from them. CMCs act like metals, but in order to do that, they need what's called a fiber reinforcement. And that's where we come in. We make the fibers so that the analogy, pulling on my materials background, right? So if you think about a ceramic material, like a dinner plate, if you drop that on the ground, what does it do? Shatters into 1,000 pieces, right? That's not what you want for performance on a rocket, on an airplane engine, and a nuclear power reactor. So what you do is, to make it act more like a metal, you add these things called these fiber reinforcements, and that allows the ceramic to not act like, we call it a monolith. Instead of acting like a monolith, it acts like a composite, or it acts more like a metal, where it will basically be able to handle the stress that a challenging environment can put on it, and handle the temperature. And oh, by the way, it also is generally, your CMCs are lighter than metals, so you get to save some weight. You get to go to higher operating temperatures. You get to be able to handle more challenging chemistry environments. So oxygen at 2,000 degrees C is a real tough thing to handle, and so CMCs are. That's where they thrive. That's where they're really meant to be used.
That is cool. So you laser to a chemical, produces a fiber.
Yep.
This fiber is metal, effectively, or is it metal, or is it just?
Nope. It's ceramic. So this
metal, or this fiber, is ceramic as well.
Correct. Yep.
And can you manipulate it like you could, twist it, mesh it, do whatever you want with it?
So there's a balance there, right? So GE has a next generation engine that is flying on Delta, Southwest. If you're flying on one of those flights, you're flying on an engine that has some of these CMC components on there. And right now, those are heat shields and nozzles. So you have some geometry, right? You have some kind of curvature. You can't do these crazy kind of challenging geometries. But for things like that, CMCs, you can fabricate them and put them in place. And like I said, GE, right now they're flying LEAP engines, and their next generation 9X engine is going to have twice as many CMC components on it as the 9X. And the 9X is going to have twice as many components as the LEAP engine. And I'm not trying to be a commercial for GE, but they, to their credit, right, they led the movement in the industry towards CMCs. And so, everybody's in the aviation space is definitely trailing in their wake.
So I think I still get it there. It makes sense if you have that, can experience the high temperature, but in like crafting, the inner piece of the turbine, you're making a fiber. Are all the fibers creating the CMC, or do you create the fibers kind of like a mesh, and then you put on more ceramic, the ceramic material to that?
The two main components in a CMC are the fiber reinforcement and the matrix. And what you're describing is, right, you put what's called a preform. You put the fibers in, kind of a starting shape or design, could be as simple as a square, right? And then you're going to backfill that space with the matrix, and that's how you form the CMC. So it's, and this is the challenge that CMCs, with manufacturing CMCs, they're ceramic. Ceramics don't melt. This is why it is not just kind of an extension of making materials out of metal alloys, because you can melt them. I mean, we know, we've known for 150 years how to make different steels and aluminum alloys, and now like single crystal nickel alloys that go on, on jet engines. But working with CMCs, you can't melt. So you've got to come up with all these other approaches, manufacturing approaches, to make the final shape. And so that's the challenge. And that's the challenge that one of the challenges we're addressing is, so many of these desired fiber chemistries, fiber compositions, there's no other way to make them, because you can't melt your way to form the fiber. You actually have to go different routes. There's one route to making these fibers, these types of fibers that we make, where you basically we call it goop, but it's like a plastic that you melt, run it through a shower head to form the fiber, and then you have to spend days and days converting that plastic to turn into the ceramic composition. For us, our advantage is once we break apart those gas molecules and they come together and they react, we form the material. And that takes on the order of seconds, right? That's not days and days and days of processing. So we have a very unique way to address, these very challenging chemistries and compositions, these ceramic materials in a fiber format. And that's part of what makes our technology so unique, because, as best as we can tell, we're definitely the only ones commercializing this technology, and we're definitely the only one that can make some of these very challenging ceramic fiber chemistries that particularly the defense industry needs to be able to operate at, the kind of temperatures that, particularly we're focused on hypersonics, right? So those Mach 5 and above vehicles, nothing that's on a commercial airplane, none of that will work in those types of hypersonic applications. And so we can make materials that truly there is no other way to make in a fiber format. And that's why we have a lot of involvement in the defense industry around making materials for, again, generally focused on hypersonic applications.
Do you find yourself mostly in the, let's say, the propulsion side of, or is it also just for the general, I imagine skin friction gets pretty hot at, Mach 8. Are you involved with that, of being able to create wing forms? And
we're working on absolutely. So there's the propulsion side, and then there's, they call it TPS, thermal protection systems, right? And so leading edge type of solutions to be able to handle, if you're saying the vehicle needs to operate at 2200 degrees Celsius. Well, that leading edge is not at 2200 degrees Celsius because of friction, like you said. And so you've got to actually be able to handle 2500 degrees Celsius. And again, that's where we'll try to solve any problem like that, because, we're not, again, another one of the kind of my go-to examples of what we're good at and what we're not good at. You do not want to use our technology to make carbon fiber to go in your tennis racket or golf club, right? It doesn't make any economic sense. There's ways that have been developed for 40 years, right, to make those kind of materials. We focus on really high value add materials and products like these fibers because they're challenging to make, and our technology makes sense to from an economic standpoint and a technical standpoint. We really focus on really high value add, really challenging applications, because that's where the technology and the economics really converged for us to be a viable solution.
Well, I'm sure Tom Cruise and Top Gun 2 wish he had you as his Mach 10 airplane disintegrated. So is it just, again, I'm still working through this in my mind.
Sure.
Knuckle Dragon fighter pilot, I'm thinking concrete with rebarb. You're the rebarb of the concrete.
That's it. And I'll add a layer to the technical discussion, because if you think about, there's an extra piece to that ceramic matrix composite component that makes it act the way you want it to act. So if it was just concrete and steel rebar, it would still act like that dinner plate, right? So what you actually have in ceramic matrix composites is you have the matrix, you have the fiber, and then you have what's called an interface coating. And that interface coating is the key to make the matrix act differently from the fibers. That's how you get it to act like a metal, because really that's what you're trying to get the CMC to keep all the good things: high temperature capability, resistance to oxidation. You want to move it away from that really brittle monolithic ceramic behavior and make it act more like a metal. And that interface coating is really the key, because it makes the matrix and fiber act separately. So maybe that helps.
No, it does. No, I get it. That's awesome. Well, I say I get it. I conceptually understand what you're saying. Is it just ceramics, or are there other materials that this, your laser driven chemical vapor technology, can you pivot into other materials with this?
Absolutely. So one of the technology advantages we have is, we draft in the 80-year history of microelectronics. There's literally tens of thousands of gas precursors that have been developed to deliver all sorts of different materials for the devices that go on microelectronics chips. We utilize that library to go and make. We've probably demonstrated and made 20 to 25 different materials. Same technology. We call it a platform technology. So we don't need to go and make a whole new set of production tools to make material X and then a second set of production tools to make material Y. It's the same system. So when we say we're going to make material X today, we input certain gases. Tomorrow, if we've got to make material Y, we shut off all the gas regulators to the precursors for material X, open up the precursors for material Y, and let that flow into the same technology. And so we call ourselves material agnostic. Generally, there's a good chance that we can make just about any material that we can find a precursor for. So
you're just making the fibers, the mesh, if you will. You send it off to manufacturing X.
Yeah.
Are you able to scale this? And are you able to make it, I picture, let's say you're making the leading edge of a wing that's 50 feet long, maybe you want to keep it all together.
Right.
Do you have that capacity or capability, or is that a challenge of scale? Is that part of what you're doing and, the start of this company?
It's actually, so we've had a number of folks come through who've had experience in manufacturing composites. So when you think about like a normal material manufacturing process, you're more than likely taking a big vat, pouring in some chemicals, mixing it up, and trying to make that final chemical, right? That final material. So for us, once we figured out, so the size of our reactor, I had mentioned, the in a chip fab foundry, the size of their reactors are truly almost football field sized, right? Our reactor size is the size of my fists, approximately. And so once we figured out, it took us a long time. We're not a software company. We're a hardware company. And, hardware is hard. And it took us a while to figure out what was going on inside that reactor. But once you figured out what, the physics and the thermodynamics and the chemical kinetics and all those, complex scientific principles that were making the final fiber material, once we understood that, for us, scaling up is truly copy paste. Like I joke to people, it's Control C, Control V. And so a production tool for us is a certain number of those chambers stacked up. We hit go, it makes fibers. We hit stop, we collect the fibers, put all the little chambers back together, and hit go again. So scaling up for us is it's capital. It's not. We spent we spent over a dozen years really figuring this out. And but once we figured it out, scaling up is about getting access to money to make more tools. It's not about, we went from 1x to 5x. How do we manage that? We've already solved the problems because it's all in that little chamber, and just copy that chamber.
So what hypersonics, are there other commercial, you got the engines? Yeah, where else are you looking that this has applicability? And
so hypersonics, aviation, nuclear power. It's driven by the Fukushima accident in Japan. That accident occurred because basically once the water circulation pumps stopped moving water, you had heat buildup around the fuel rod tubes. Those are the tubes that hold the uranium pellets. That water heated up the metal, basically broke apart the water, and you built up hydrogen gas. That blew the stack off. That was what happened at Fukushima. What they're doing now, what the Congress did here in the U.S. in 2012, they said, we're going to find a solution that gives us a higher factor of safety. Basically, it's about a factor of safety. They call it loss of coolant accident. So you're trying to give yourself as much time before you blow the top off, right, of the nuclear power stack. And so what they're moving to is CMCs, same material, right? Same material that we've been working on, for a dozen years. And so we're very active in that space. And the last market that it's the most recent application that we started exploring maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, but talking about semiconductor. So right now, all the chips in our laptops and our cell phones, those are silicon substrate based. The next generation of chips are going to be made out of silicon carbide, which also happens to be the material that's of interest for nuclear, for aviation. And so what we've been able to do is we make really bad fibers. You would never use them in a composites application, but we make these, relatively speaking, much bigger fibers that are terrible mechanical quality, but they're pure. The catchphrase I use about, what's the number one advantage of LCVD, it's purity. Purity drives performance. What do you need in semiconductor applications? Every time you hit on your laptop or open up your phone, it better work, right? And if it doesn't, it's probably a chip problem. And impurities drive problems with microelectronic chips. And so the next generation of microelectronic chips are going to be made on silicon carbide substrates. And this has been driven by the military by probably about 20 years ago. They were funding all the research here in the US that went into silicon carbide technology, silicon carbide semiconductor technology. It went commercial maybe around 2011, 2012. But really what is making silicon carbide semiconductor technology go is electric vehicles. You cannot, if you want to have a 15 to 20 minute charging station, you'll be able to charge your car in 15 to 20 minutes. You have to run the charger at 800 volts. Silicon wafers cannot handle that. Silicon carbide can handle that. And so you've got charging technology, you've got electric vehicle control technology, battery technology that's going to need these silicon carbide wafers. And so what we can do is we can take these really bad fibers we make and grind them up and hand them over to that community to go and make the silicon carbide wafers. And that, I mean, by far, that dwarfs from a market size standpoint, that dwarfs any of these others. Now, it's going to take a little while to get there, but you're talking about tens to $100 billion of silicon carbide microelectronics industry by 2030, 2032. I mean, it's going to be huge. And so we're trying to offer that purity advantage over the way that, the way that the material is made now has shortcomings in terms of purity. We can offer something that gives them purity driving better performance.
So you're working with like Tesla?
So farther upstream,
Okay.
we want to work with somebody like Intel, right? Intel isn't really involved in silicon carbide microelectronics, but the equivalents to Intel that make the chips, that's who we're trying to connect with.
Oh, that is cool. Well, very interesting. So are there competitive technologies that are aligned with you, or you got patents you mentioned? Is this kind of your space, or are there people that are pushing in?
It's interesting. There's nobody doing the LCVD. That is our space. We have a pretty robust patent portfolio protecting products and product by processes. Like in the fiber space, there are competitive processes. One in particular that's been around for 40 years. It's that plastic goo technology process that I was describing before. The Japanese developed that maybe going on now about 50 years ago, is in the late 70s. And, there are companies like us, smaller companies that are making their way in terms of making fibers for these industries, but they have shortcomings. They don't get the purity. They have secondary structures in the fiber that, for a composite, you need a fiber that's the width of a human hair. When we call that, we say, one of these companies makes a product we call it a telephone pole. It's 6 times the diameter of a human hair. It's all relative, right? So it's,
right.
It's really not that big, but in the context of using it as a reinforcement in a composite, man, it doesn't, you talk about, trying to get a composite component that has some geometry to it. That sized fiber will never bend to be able to conform to a more complex geometry. Whereas what we make, we can get the purity, and you can make it. You can actually, incorporate it into these composite manufacturing techniques.
Fascinating. Well, this is cool technology. How do you guys look at protecting your IP from like a cybersecurity and physical protection?
It's interesting because we really weren't all that active in the defense space until about 4 years ago. And I mark it as when the Chinese and Russians started talking about sending their hypersonic missiles around the Earth. That's when the Defense Department here in the U.S. realized, we were about 10 years behind the Chinese, and you can't imagine the amount of money that is flowing into, you probably can't. No, you absolutely can. The amount of money that's flowing into, hypersonics materials development is unbelievable. And that's when we really got involved. And the reason I bring that up is, we're a small little company in an old cereal box manufacturing plant. We would protect our IP by writing it down in notebooks, right? That was the kind of, nobody's going to hack into our notebook. Since we become more involved, in the defense related, markets and applications, we've gone through a cybersecurity evaluation, right? And when we brought our first production tools online, instead of managing our own IT, we brought in somebody who is here locally, here in upstate New York, who manages IT for prisons and power generation, power plants where, you can't go offline. And so they set up a system so that our production tools, they call it sandboxed. You can't access our production tool, the control systems for our production tools. You can't access them from the outside. We wouldn't have thought about doing that 5, 10 years ago, right? We just thought, well, we're going to want to be able to connect to them when we're home. Well, no, we don't. Not now, right? Now you don't want to be able to give a backdoor for somebody to come in and hijack the controls of our production equipment. So we've tried to be pretty thoughtful about, from the cyber perspective. We know that, like I said, we're in an old cereal box manufacturing plant. I have 6-foot windows in my office. We had a guy who came in doing part of the cybersecurity assessment. He also did a physical security assessment. He was from the ex-CIA. He walked into our space and he just shook his head and he said, yeah, that's not going to work. That's never going to work. So when we get to the point of, very likely a dedicated space to make material for the Department of Defense supply chain, we won't be doing it here. We'll go and have to set up a facility that has eye scans and, all the kinds of things where you got to make sure you know who's coming in and out.
Yeah. It's challenging. Very, because I'm sure what you've got is pretty important and pretty interesting, I am sure, to certain people.
Yes. We joke that there's probably a file somewhere in Moscow and Beijing on us, this little, 10-person company in New York.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So talk to me about the growth of how you guys are looking at scaling. Is it all going to be based on, you got some cyber contracts you mentioned, you've gone through that process. Where's really the acceleration going to hit, and what is that going to look like for you guys?
So there's a combination here of, probably getting strategic investment from somebody who cares about these markets, right? And again, a lot of it's about capital, right? We're developing our sales revenue. If you wanted to accelerate this so that by 2026, 2027, we'd need a chunk of money and we'd go quadruple, quintuple the number of production tools we have so that we can satisfy those markets. But there's also opportunities where if we don't find a strategic, there are opportunities through the DoD programs, through those SBIR. With DoD, you can get into what are called phase 3 opportunities. Phase 1 and phase 2 are about developing the technology, showing that it's viable. When you get to a phase 3, you're talking about supply chain, right? They want to have a procurement system so that they can depend on your technology, you as a company, to supply, whether it's directly to DoD or to the primes and their supply chain. And so there's programs to go and help small companies like us scale up, from a financial resources standpoint. So we're looking at a bunch of different ways to leverage, what we're doing in DoD, finding some strategic partners in those different markets who want to partner with us and help us grow this out to basically enable their technology to advance to the next, kind of the next level of performance. So we're very active in communications, right? In talking with folks about what opportunity do we have? What are you interested in? So that's something that we're very focused on right now.
Right. So it's merely going to be as the biggest driver for you guys to be when these defense contracts, as they grow and scale, and the use cases continue to get proven out on the military side. Commercial, that's still at both the battery development, and
different level. Yeah, different space. Yeah, it's funny. There is a company in our space that makes that makes those telephone pole fibers, relatively speaking, and they make a flaperon for the Navy. I think it is one of the jets. They got spec'd in the early 90s. They have been selling this fiber for 30 years, right? That's when it comes to DoD, if you can get written into the specifications of a program of record, man, just not just ride the wave, but I mean, if you, as long as you deliver, you can get a long lifetime out of that kind of customer relationship. So
your company is mostly made up of, it's not like the standard startup, young Stanford, or some sort of, which is actually probably similar to ours. How is that from a culture perspective? And, is it all kind of, from that materials background? Is everyone, heavy science?
it is. So we started commercializing in late 2020. We had decided we were ready. I've been here since 2012. Right around the time I became CEO, we had made that decision about going commercial. Up until that point, I referred to us as, the group of propeller heads that were solving a lot of, interesting R&D questions, but we weren't ready for, being a manufacturer. But I mean, it's true, right? The startup culture of, you need different backgrounds. You don't want to have everybody, with the same skill set, because you need people that can do 4 or 5 different things and not get pulled out of their comfort zone where they can't function. But what is cool about our, the technology we're working on, it is very unique. It's a very unique opportunity. When I joined, I was the first employee, and that was we were 5 people. Now we're at 12, and we've got employees, that we've hired since we started commercializing. And the thing is, right, so these are folks that have been here a couple of years, and they're bought in. They recognize what we're doing is very unique, very cool. There's a lot of challenges. We always, make the joke that we're on the leading edge of the leading edge. We can't go and buy LCVD equipment from anybody. We make all of it. We designed our production tools. We manufactured 80% of it, of the components. We don't make lasers. That's a little outside of our skill set, but pretty much everything else, we're making here, which means you're solving some real challenging problems, and that it is fairly continuous, right? You're constantly figuring out, all right, how do I manage this? How do I design this? How do I solve this, this integration problem? And so it makes the culture, it's easy for me. I don't have to do anything, in the sense of, the challenges are there, and we have a group of people that are, very motivated and very, very, very capable. I mean, that's obviously the other part of it is you need smart people. You need to be around smart people to be able to work on this kind of stuff.
I love being around smart people like this podcast itself. Cool. So thank you. All right. Well, man, I really enjoyed this. This has been a cool technology. I wish you guys the best, but I think that's all we're going to have time for today. But if people want to kind of follow and see when that next big push for freeform fibers happens, how's the best, what's your media and how would they follow you?
Yeah. So we're on LinkedIn, and, our website, we're pretty active about making sure that, the news of our different programs and our different, different projects and achievements are on there. So that website is www.fffibers.com. So 3 F's as in freeform fibers, and then the Ibers. So it's always confusing. Yeah, exactly. I always have to repeat it when I'm giving that website to somebody over the phone. What is it now? It's FFF. So, but we try to be pretty, make sure people know what's going on with what we're doing. So,
all right. Well, it's been a pleasure, Shay. Thank you for your time, and let's stay in touch.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Dave. I appreciate it.
Thanks.